Okay, I've been asked to get going.
Exactly. That's what we're doing.
12:20. Okay. Want to give you a little background about myself. During the session, please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions. I find that it's a little easier to answer the question in the heat of the moment when it's a big topic than it is afterwards. We kind of have to warm up to whatever we were talking about again. If it's something that I can't answer in a quick, 2 sentences or something in a quick discussion, then come talk to me afterwards. What I'm going to do here, this is part 2. David did a wonderful job in laying the framework and kind of going over all of the nuts and bolts of process. There's a lot there, right? There's so much. But it's a powerful tool. And what I'm going to do here is go in a little bit deeper on, okay, yeah, that's great. We have data sets, but it breaks when I do this. Or I have a form and this is breaking every time I use it this way. So I'm going to go over some of the high-level pitfalls that we have or that exist within MasterControl forms, our process module in general. Some reporting considerations. David talked about the reports, how they work. I'm going to talk about some reportings, things that you should not do. It may sound great, but so, and then I'm going to talk about out-of-box forms versus form modifications. You've probably heard a lot about eForms, the form builder utility that's in 11.3. 11.4, I think, released yesterday or so. Anyways, 11.4 is coming out. There's some enhancements to that as well in there. It's a great tool, but I do want to talk about it from if you're really serious about it, there's a couple things that you should probably consider when you're using that so that you can be successful. We want the tool to be successful. I think it's a great thing. It's a great idea, but there are limitations on what it can do, and I just want to bring those up front so the expectation is there and so that we're not biting off more than we can chew sometimes, and it maybe isn't solving the need. So, actually, a little background on me first, so that you just kind of know where my perspective comes from. I come from a med device background. I started on a manufacturing line doing microdot soldering on a OEM air bubble detectors, piezo electronics and things, where we would make these little air bubble detectors for IV machines and whatever else, but there was big ones, there was little ones. Worked my way up into building, I went to school for software, and when I was able to do a little bit more in software, they allowed me to intern there and make software that would test those medical devices, which was so much fun. We got to interface with oscilloscopes, gain phase analyzers, function generators. Any engineers in here? I don't know. Anyways, it was a lot of fun. But it made the work a lot easier. We used technology to make things a little bit more sure. Found out that there's a lot of human error involved in a lot of processes that we have, especially in med device and pharma, and found that software can be a very vital and very powerful tool to help to make those medical devices faster and better. From there, I went up to say, hey, we can do this better in general. I moved up to be a business analyst, where I just kind of improved different processes throughout the business. Worked with the finance people. I worked with the quality people a lot. Med device company, anything I tried to get out the door wouldn't go through quality, so I learned to make good friends with them. Learned to bring in donuts when I needed to. But found out that technology can be a huge benefit in a highly regulated environment. Dealt a lot with the FDA on getting these software solutions validated so that we could use those. And found out how broad the FDA swipes that brush on whether or not it's validated or not. It just all depends on whether we've proven that it does what it's supposed to. You can do that a lot of different ways. Anyways, my company that I was working for bought MasterControl. I saw the process module and saw, hey, HTML, JavaScript. I could do anything now, right? Build a complaint form so that we could use that, so our customer service reps could just enter the information they needed, integrate with our Lotus Notes database.
All right.
Yay!
Oh, there's the
It's
other Lotus
good.
Notes user.
If you've ever integrated with it, though. No, it was good. Lotus Notes.
One little user.
Yeah.
Oh, two. Yeah.
Oh, two represent. Oh, by the way, if you have questions, ask Phil. I'll direct your questions to Phil. He's great.
Thank you.
Yep. And found that, yes, it can be powerful, but I quickly bit off more than I could chew and realized that, whoa, okay, I need to be careful here. There's a lot that I can do, but there's a lot that I should not do. There's things that we should have the business handle and things that we should have the software handle. So what I do as a process architect, I like the process module a lot. I liked MasterControl as a company, came to work at MasterControl to do that, to improve processes within businesses, to allow them to get what they needed easier and quicker. And I found that it is very possible, and MasterControl has a very powerful tool to allow you to do that. But with great power comes great responsibility. Okay? You can dig yourself a hole really fast. And anytime I engage with a customer on a whatever process they're wanting to implement in their business, I make sure that we keep it within the bounds that MasterControl can, one, handle effectively, and also that'll just get us what we need. Let's make sure we know what the needs are. It's a good opportunity to maybe streamline your existing process, but also I'll tell you what MasterControl can do really well and what it doesn't do really well. And I'll do that up front because I want you to be successful, and I don't want to get into a situation also where I'd led you down the wrong path and now you're not getting what you want. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about when we go over these types of things, and that's my perspective from a med device background anyways. I guess I can use this, huh? So here's some of the common pitfalls that we use, or that we find when customers implement process module, and this is out of the box. So there's an intended use for all of these forms. When they were designed and implemented, they were designed with a specific path and with some specific parameters set around them. Complaint, for instance, kappa. The kappas go on a path, and they have to continue on that path to get all the way through. What happens a lot of times is, well, a company, to save money, which understandable, that's why we're in business, we need to stay in business, will say, hey, there's a kappa form, but if I instead use this reference field as a customer RMA number field, I can just use that because we don't use the reference field. You can do that, yes, but on the report, it's really confusing. In an audit situation, it's, well, that doesn't say that, right? And I've had a couple of customers do that, but it's really easy just to change the label on the field, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But sometimes when you're using things as they're not intended, you also have unintended consequences at the end, because when you get on a path, you're set on that path, and at the end, you've got too much between A and B that has happened that you can't change it. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that more. So roles used in the forms. I'm going to use action items as an example. So David talked a little bit about action items. If anybody's familiar with action items, let's say in kappa or a complaint, you can assign an effectiveness check to someone. Well, there's a little box there that's task assignee or action item assignee that has a list of users in it. Okay. A lot of customers will say, hey, I want everybody in the company to be in there because I could potentially assign any of these actions to anyone in the company. Well, I deal with some pretty large companies. And if they put everyone in there, okay, let's give so a little perspective. On the kappa form, you can have, I think, up to 10 action items 3 or 4 times on the form. Well, if you have 10 of those combo boxes, those drop-down boxes with users in it, the form in version 10 brings all, and let's say you have 10,000 users in your system. Okay, so we're starting to exponentially do some math here. It pulls in 10,000 users to that drop-down box every time. Okay, we have fixed that, but if you're in 10, that's what will happen. So if your form, you crank it up and you're ready to go, and you sit there, you wait, and you go get a cup of coffee and come back, your form's still not loaded. Well, it's loading 10 times 30 users into that system. Yeah, it's bad, but we fixed it. But I want you to know that that's what will happen. So if you're having that problem, limit the amount of users that go into that action item. Okay? One thing that you can look out for. That's one of the pitfalls we found, because the forms won't even load. It takes a long, long, long time for them to load. Data structure size. Same type of concept here. Okay? Part numbers. It's a great thing to be able to pull your part numbers from your ERP system or whatever system you use to manage your part information so that you don't have to update all the time, or it's just right there and you're not having duplicate stuff that can get out of sync. But if you have 30,000 part numbers and you're putting that into the field 3 times, it's 90,000 points of data that you're putting into the form. It'll also load slowly. Okay, some considerations. Data structure usage. Now, we talked a little bit about this before, but I want to get into a little bit more depth, and feel free to ask questions on when it's appropriate to use a data structure or an external data source. You have a question?
No, that,
Okay.
you're leading into what I was going to
Yes,
ask.
go ahead.
Is data structure loading 6 and 11? Or are all large fields, large data structures 6 and 11?
Are you referring to the amount of fields you can load at a time?
Yeah.
I think. Didn't they increase that?
They did, yes.
So I'm going to talk about that, though. I don't know because I never do it. Right? Well, if I have to load 60,000 fields into MasterControl and pull them, and then Clark Kent over in quality loads 3 more parts in there, what do I have to do? Okay? So that's what I'm talking about here, is if you have things that change often, customer information, product information, I'd recommend using an external data source. Now, if you're going to run into problems with your IT department that says, no, MasterControl can't have any access to our system, that's okay. We don't need access to your ERP, but you can make a view for us. You can make kind of a side database that you can give us access to. We're happy to pull it from there. But then it can be real time, okay? It can be quicker, or you can do it every day, you can do it whatever you want. But then we're always in the forum getting the real data that we need, rather than having to update MasterControl, put all that burden on somebody to have to load an Excel spreadsheet and throw that in there all the time. When is it appropriate to use a data structure? What's a good example of a data structure usage?
For products.
Product, I can remember.
Yeah, products. I would probably use external data source. How about data structures, where you actually just put them into MasterControl? I'll throw one out there, complaint source. Okay, there's probably 10 or 12 complaint sources, but it may change. You might acquire a company, you might acquire a new product, and all of a sudden you need to add another source. Well, that's okay. I can go in there, do that. Now, from now on, all the new forms will have a new source that I can add. Things that you have kind of a discrete list that's not going to change very often, but could be subject to change. I use a data structure for those because they're easy. You can go in and manipulate them. Parts, customers, maybe complaint data that you may pull in from another auxiliary system. I would try to go external. And we've connected with lots of different types of databases. The new Rilo with V11, I saw a little reference to Rilo on his slide, is a powerful tool. And we've used it, and it connects very well. We did let's see, what's an arbitrary database? So, what's that?
SAP.
SAP we do all the time. That one's easy. I'm talking like, what are the old ones? What's a really old database?
Globia.
What's that?
Globia is the ERP system that we use.
Perfect. So it's back end we could probably connect to now. I've been surprised with what we've been able. I can't even remember because it's so arbitrary.
Do you do CRM?
CRM? I don't know. Have to look at that one. If it has a JDBC connector, it'll work, which it probably does. Any database worth its salt is going to have connectors like that. So that's what's good about those. So anyway, some considerations between external data sources and data structures. Okay? And if anybody programs data set, the confusion a lot of times comes from, hey, when I'm using data set in the code, it points to a data structure. So just to make it easy.
Right.
Yep. Routes. Can you go and change the route in MasterControl? Your Kappa route?
Sure you can.
You sure can.
Should you?
Should you? Yes, exactly. There are a few things that you're probably okay changing. What are those things? I just want to kind of, what can you probably change and be okay and not blow the form up?
Step due date.
Step due dates, that's a good one. You can change the step due date. Roles,
Roles.
that one's pretty good. You're fine on the roles for the most part, 99.9% of the time.
It's number of signers, like 1 versus all.
Yep. So your majority, all, or 1, you can change that. That'll work. Now, if I go and change the route and I have 30 kappas that are in process, what's going to happen to those 30 kappas? Absolutely nothing, actually. They'll continue on the configuration that they started on, so you're okay. Okay. Things you should not change: step IDs or names.
Yeah.
Or numbers.
Amen. So the ID is the number of the step.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. The names of the step. While you think that you might be able to do that, sometimes there are routes that depend, or JavaScript that says, if the step is this, do this. So if the step is not that anymore, the code doesn't know what to do. So we're improving those things, though. I mean, we make it configurable, but we also are working harder to make the code a little more malleable to allow that configuration to happen. Okay. Adding and removing steps. Hey, I've got a kappa form that's got 11 steps on it, but I don't need 11 steps. I'm going to cut out 4, 5, and 8. Right. And the reason it'll most likely explode on you is because there are certain things that in our configuration of kappa we expect to happen on step 1. After that, we depend on the thing in step 2. We look back to step 1 to say, okay, yes, this all happened, and so on. So if you take out one of those steps, so if you remove step 3, step 4 is going to say, hey, on step 3 they were supposed to fill out the investigation steps. Well, if those aren't there anymore, it kind of doesn't know how to handle it. So don't add or remove steps. Okay? We're happy to help with that, obviously. We can make that work in my group, the TFS group, Technical Field Services. That's what we do. And we're pretty good at it, actually. We've got a really great team. And one of the great things we're doing, too, is kind of the form builder. That was developed by one of the ex-TFS people that's moved into sales, Mark Sloan. He used to work in TFS. Some more things that you may hear, or if you had opportunity to go to the eForms class, or the MCML that we're doing, and the JavaScript libraries that we're doing for any developers, we're standardizing a lot. So the broader scope of standardization that we're able to offer as a process team, the more powerful the users can, the more power that we're allowing the users to have. And it's not only a good, let's say, the ability to do certain things, it's also the ability to do them safely. So that's what we're working for. Reject to a step. Some of you may be familiar with this concept, and it is a good thing to have. But if you're on the last step of a kappa, and you decide, okay, I want to add reject, this is just an arbitrary example, but if you want to add reject to a step, and I want to be able to reject it back to step 1, well, you've already launched a kappa, or sorry, an issue review, or you've already launched a bunch of action items. You've already made decisions. Well, if you go back to step 1, you can change the F by I score, you can change your risk, you can change everything, and then all of a sudden you have, at the beginning of the form, a list of risk that has nothing to do with the kappa and the implementations that you did later. So there are certain points of no return in a form that we try to enforce, okay? And so when you're thinking about a form, either using your eForms process, you want to consider, hey, there's some decision points that are kind of final. We have approvals for those. We want to make sure they're good because it takes a lot to explain why we changed that idea. And we can do that, but those are things to consider. Don't just throw a reject a step in any step of the route. It could be problematic. And you can only reject back to a data entry step, just as kind of a caveat to that. Any questions on routes and these pitfalls? Okay. Reporting considerations. So David did a wonderful job of explaining how reports work and also explaining some of the concerns or some of the ideas that you want to keep in mind when you're building a report. What I'm going to talk about is data set size. So as David explained, when you create a report, there is a kind of a parent data set that gets loaded that has every single field on the form. If you have a form, very easily you can have 1,000 fields on a form because it's not just what you see, it's what also the system embeds underneath and a lot of hidden fields that we use as part of functionality to make the form work. Okay? Here's a scenario. You have someone that's, yay, I went to QEM training, I want to build reports, I want to, conquer the world. Now, they take this big report and say, well, why wouldn't I want everything in the report? It's going to be a comprehensive, good report. So I'm going to put a filter on it that says I want all the report or all the CAPAs that are in process or all the complaints that are in process. And I want to test that in my production environment. Boom. Submit and view. Sit and wait for a minute. Wait for a few more minutes and, like we did the cup of coffee before. But then you start getting phone calls from your users, right? These reports bog down the system when you use these huge ginormous reports, okay? So my recommendation is report only on what is necessary. Create a data set for just the information that you need, okay? If it's, one way to do that is to talk to your users, talk to the report users, look at what they're looking at now and mimic that with the report. Because sometimes what happens when I put an idea in front of the users and show the power and the broad scope of what we can provide them, they say, well, sure, I want it all. Yeah. No. But we're getting better at that. Pull up what they have, their Excel spreadsheet. Whatever they're using now, find those, put it in there, and maybe talk about what we can do to expand that and make it better, but be conservative. Because these big, huge reports will bring a company to their knees. And I've had that happen. David probably deals with that too often. So, with great power comes great responsibility. The filters on the report. Knowing how the reporting tool works is a huge benefit. I was actually sitting in a Genius desk just yesterday talking about, hey, my CAPA past dues aren't working, right? It's not what I would call user-friendly and intuitive, to be honest. From more that I've learned about user experience training and kind of my internet usage, when I go into the report builder, for me, and I've been in software for a long time, and I can think at it in SQL terms, and I can say, okay, well, I can build the SQL statement and just make it work. But I can't just go in there and say, hey, I want a CAPA past due report, and know that it's 0, minus 0 days or whatever, today minus 0 to make it past due. If you need help with that, I think tech support provides a little help with that as well. But anything that's on the form, any field that you see on the form can be reported on. Okay, so it's just a matter of understanding what field is best to use as a filter and how to set that filter up correctly. Okay, it can work and it works very well. The out-of-box reports work fairly well. You can look to those for some guidance on how they do theirs as well. Okay. Keep reports as simple as possible. I kind of talked about that already. That's just to limit the data set size, and also when the report comes up and you've got the huge comprehensive version of the report, you have your columns or your rows down there, and you have your columns that go out 2 miles, right? That's not a useful report. If you have to spend 10 minutes to find what you're looking for, that's not a report we need, okay? System access and roles. Another thing that I run into often when reporting is concerned, say, hi, I made this perfect report. It's streamlined, it's great, and my users can't see it. Well, why not? Because they don't have the proper role, the rights in their role to be able to view the action item draft vault or the CAPA draft vault, which is where all of your in-process CAPAs, in-process action items are housed. So that's another thing that you have to be aware of. When you give someone reporting rights and make a role for that user, they need to have the appropriate rights to be able to view what they're supposed to. Because you can set the report up, but they won't be able to see it. Okay, questions on reporting?
I
Yeah.
have more on the roles on the rights.
Uh-huh.
We created a few, 2-3 additional roles
Uh-huh.
for instance, management, so they can see in process, because most people don't have access to the draft vaults.
Uh-huh.
And some that are just viewers, they can't watch like a deviation, but they can see them because manufacturing has to follow the deviation. So it hasn't broken anything, so I'm assuming it's okay.
Yeah.
And we can create them additional roles outside of what was installed.
Sure, yep. The roles aren't going to break anything that's working now. If you change the roles the out-of-box roles that David showed, yeah, you might have problems there. Okay, but creating additional roles is actually what I would recommend. If you have a need of users to view something that they're really not involved in, perfect example for that. Okay. So, how much time do I have? Okay. So this is kind of a big topic, and it's a big question for a lot of customers. I've got an out-of-box form. My users do things a certain way now. Can we use the out-of-box form or not? So what I say, or what I have done in the past, and also what I recommend to clients, is to do a gap analysis. And what I mean by that is to take your current process, map it out on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, just draw boxes. It says, so-and-so in accounting takes, well, accounting's a bad example. So-and-so in quality. Sorry. There's no accountants in here, are there? Yes. Okay. So-and-so in quality has an issue, and they start up a CAPA, whatever. Draw the boxes. They open this Excel spreadsheet. This Excel spreadsheet has these fields on it. I can't tell you how many Excel spreadsheets I deal with from existing. I mean, I did that when I was in med device. The quality team ran on Excel spreadsheets. It's a good tool, but it can be better. All those fields that they need, follow it all the way through the process until it's done, so that you can get all the Excel spreadsheets on everybody's computer and not forget any of them. Because by the time you're done, there's always some lingering, oh yeah, and then Joe over in the warehouse does this and he keeps it on a sheet somewhere, I don't know where it is, right? That happens all the time, which is okay. As long as you know about it, you can account for it, put it as part of your requirements for your system. So you have your nice mapped process, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Then open MasterControl's form that does that. Let's say it's a complaint, and you've gone through, you've talked to the CSRs, you've talked to the complaint manager, you've talked to the quality people that handle complaints. You know what it takes to do a complaint in your business. Open our complaint module and start kind of just crossing off the needs. Okay, oh, this does it this way. You might have to maybe tweak some methodology or some thinking about it. And whatever's left over is the gap. Okay, either MasterControl handles this, or it doesn't, or there's so much extra that we don't need that it's just not worth it. Okay, if you're about 80-20 rule is kind of what I always go by. If 80% of the functionality is there and 20% can be, I'm not going to say worked around, but can be handled, it might be better. Or we have what's called our minor change offering. And some of you may be familiar with what that is. In a minor change, the idea of that is that we take one of our existing out-of-box forms and we just tweak it a little bit to make it work for you. If you don't need much changed, it's a cost-effective way of doing it in a very low-risk solution to whatever you're trying to implement in your company. Because we leverage all the existing validation, all the existing process that MasterControl has for the out-of-box form. We provide you a design document that says this is exactly what changed. So if you need to do your PQ validation, when you build your PQ script to validate this process, you can take the out-of-box PQ that we provide and just change those parts and make sure you validate them. So we do that a lot, actually. That's a very common thing. We like doing those And based on the feedback we get and the things that we change in the out-of-box forms, we provide those to our development team to say, hey, we're getting a lot of these, and we implement that into the core product. Okay, so it's kind of a synergy, right? It works very well. So that's one offering to consider. So if your gap isn't too great, that's you're a good candidate for a minor change offering. So let's say that the gap is too large, okay? And it happens. It's not because your business isn't doing things the right way or using best business practice, whatever it's defined in 2015, okay? But your company has history. You had a CAPA finding back in 2001, and as part of your response, you say, hey, on every complaint form, we're going to ask about error code 0052. I had to deal with that. I know exactly what that's like. 43 was lovely. And so on every complaint form, we had a nice little box that said, is it a 00453 error? Well, you have to put that, and it needs to be on your form. Okay, you have to account for it. So sometimes the whole process may not be your, dream way of the way you want to do it, but that's how business needs to get done, and that's okay. From there, you kind of say, yep, I know how we do it now. MasterControl can come in and take a look at your process. It's always better for us if we have a nice comprehensive list of what you do now. And we can say, we can mimic this, we can make it work or not for this much. That's custom, right? We do a lot of custom forms, do them all the time. So we will provide to you a budgetary estimate that says this is what it's going to cost you to do that. And then you can weigh that decision. It can be very powerful, and we've done that a lot with other companies, lots of companies. But I like to make sure that it makes sense for your business. The salesperson is always going to say, yep, you're going to love it. And that's fine. And yeah, most likely you will, but that's because we take the time and make sure that it's going to be a good fit. Okay? I know what it's like to be in the situation where you are accountable to your regulatory body, and you're going to have to answer to an audit. I have been in audit situations. I've had to answer for that complaint form that I built. I passed, by the way, which is good. We failed on other things, but...
What about validation on those custom forms?
So with the custom form, that's an excellent question. We provide a comprehensive design document. And from that design document, all of the requirements for the PQ are, you just take those from the user requirement. We create a checkbox requirement that says, does it do this, does it do that? So we provide that. We can also provide the validation services where our validation team will take the design document that was written, build the PQ script, and execute it for you. And we'll do that in-house on a larger form prior to even installing it and putting it into your system to do the actual PQ. So let's see. Okay, any other questions?